Welcome to the Almost Daily ZenCast, an independent production of CTech Studios, an audiovisual production company that does not exist in real life, entirely in my mind. Hello and namaste, thank you for tuning in. Keeping things sort of counterintuitively hyper-casual, let's fire up a little bit of DJ Zed music to just take a moment to pause everything and reset. Tuning in, folks, especially during such a strange new time. We face a true event horizon, a trigger point, a tipping point, fork in the road, historical branching open of a new chapter here in these great old United States of America. Welcome, of course, everyone from around the world, and I am always perpetually so grateful that this humble little irreverent and irregular podcast is listened to in 25 plus countries around the living planet. The Almost Daily ZenCast, bringing you a special segment of news, breaking news. Welcome, one and all. I humbly invite you, dear listeners, to settle in and join me in the imaginary conference room in the theater of our minds that we share cybernetically and intradimensionally as we gather around to do this thing called podcasting. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and that was Ecstatic Alliterations, a new DJ Zed audio entertainment track from a fictional album entitled Nether Worlds, created with animatronic digital love. Actually, I know that's, well, I mean, it's a bit of both. DJ Zed's over there in the corner looking at me like, what are you talking about? I am an animatronic, fully analog being. But put a pin in that. We'll talk about it later. Created on the Remix Live Cosmic Elevation audio asset pack. Thank you for tuning in, folks. Thank you, DJ Zed, for collaborating with me on that bit of beautiful music. If you enjoy the robot dance music, audio entertainment tracks, and the genre we're experimentally exploring known as Discotheque Synthetica, please, by all means, head on over to soundcloud.com/Mr. Zebo and enjoy the full playlist of songs available to you there without any of the usual interruptions and talking through it that are common here on the show. This is an audio blog, podcast, talk show style, self-expression, public discourse themed or oriented entertainment show for you to consume and contemplate. And a bit of disclaimer, I suppose, right up front. I have long been pro-choice. On today's episode of News Breaking News, we will be unpacking the complex set of events and situations that are currently in dynamic flow of unfolding before us here behind the orange and blue curtain that is the sociopolitical, cultural environment of the collective community of communities known as these grand old United States of America. And it's inherently weird, and no judgment, no hate, just it's inherently weird, in my humble opinion, political process which seems to openly rely on a sort of bizarre us versus them tribalistic antagonism at its core. But that's a lot in and of itself. Sorry for the mouthful of verbiage. Please do reference the imaginary corkboard floating, theoretically, if you could see me, off to my left shoulder in the blank spot on my wall, where I would be, like many people have used that, many, why did I start with many? Where there would be, many things pinned up on the board. That's what I was trying to say. And I would be standing next to it, waving my arms around, trying to connect all the dots. Join me in a session of discussing complex things in pursuit of neither the left wing nor the right wing solution, but something that transcends both and hopefully, maybe just maybe, actually solves a problem instead of creating more political problems in the wake of legislative shenanigans. Okay, not that I pretend to be a legislative genius. So I was trying to disclaimer, I have been pro-choice for quite some time, but also for full contextualization, I was raised and taught within the Christian/Catholic kind of domestic background of growing up in a world that did indeed still sort of hold the default, if not commonly spoken out loud, sort of conceit that, if not a majority, a plurality of the cultural consensus was generally to be, if not directly, because of the inherent injunction through the separation of church and state, sort of casually or domestically, really, on a sort of family-by-family, individual basis, a kind of Christian, Judeo-Christian foundation for the theoretically nonpartisan and mind you, I use the word theoretically in all caps and italicized, double underlined, and highlighted with multiple asterisks for all the different sort of adjunct things that need to go wrong with that, along with it. This is where I really wish I had a conversation partner here in the studio where I can be like, what was I just saying? And did you want to interrupt and say something right now? Because I've totally lost my track and I have no idea what I want to say next. Welcome to the show, folks. Let's dig in. Oh, wait, I know. Here's a perfect moment. Let me, for purposes of keeping the show consistent and audibly identifiable as a separate segment from the other segments that I do on my silly multi-segment podcast show, here is the official breaking news intro.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled brainwashing in order to bring you breaking news. A special segment of the almost daily ZenCast, focused on curious, quirky, and quixotic news items that you may have missed during the last 48-hour news cycle. Hosted by me, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.
Please note, it's important to understand that I am inherently, implicitly, and overtly somewhat absurdist in my approach to presenting this podcast. There is a bit of let's remember to take things seriously, but not over seriously, and always pause to reflect upon whether or not the things we're taking very seriously aren't way over the line of absurdity. So I digress. Oh, on a quick note about brainwashing, the use of that word, I do not cling to any of the commonly associated conspiracy theories that one might conjure in one's mind upon the use of that word. I use that comically because if I'm anything, which I'm technically not even what I'm about to call myself, I'm a Zenist or a Buddhist or a Zen somethingist. But I overtly sort of go, I don't think we should have isms. That's an ingredient in my worldview, right? If Buddha and others who spoke about transcendence, were really trying to point us towards anything, is that ultimately we need to transcend ideological constructs. Put a pin in that for the immediately circling back in this episode. I presume, if I don't completely lose track of it. If this were a live show in front of a studio audience, which it is not, and it is not capable of being, I wish it were, but it's just me sitting in my spare bedroom, sitting around by myself, thinking through things, meditating on them, and then, reading as much as I humanly can as one person by myself, as opposed to a team of information gatherers and, entertainment, news, comedy writers, which one day I aspire to be the job creator of creating. Put a pin in that on the sort of extracurricular extension board off to one side. Okay, so friends, for anyone who may not be aware, because curiously, this is something that although it's been a day and a half or so, it isn't too unreasonable to realize or to accept or to acknowledge that plenty of people may not have come across this just quite yet. But brace yourselves. The hubbub and the news cycle, the hubbub of the following news cycles will bring this issue to a sort of clamorous, intensely loud volume, presumably, in the following days. So for those who may not be aware, a leaked document, which for a period, was not confirmed by anyone, although I think even the people... I'm not entirely sure when they published it, if they had somehow managed to verify it, but it wasn't independently confirmed by anyone else, including the originating body, surfaced and was published, that clearly made it simple that the Supreme Court of the United States of America was eminently about to render a decision, which is a constitutional process by which they express their authority in a sort of, in theory, checks and balance sort of way about how to interpret the law and what to adhere to and what not to adhere to, etc. And in this leaked document, it was clear that the SCOTUS was preeminently on the verge of striking down Roe versus Wade. And currently, Americans around the world and human beings in America, just people all over the place are probably, reaching for their telecommunications devices to see and find for themselves a copy of this SCOTUS initial draft document that made it into American media. Now, there's a lot to unpack from this event as an event, from the document as a foreshadowing of what will eventually be, in theory, a final, official, public, legal decision and opinion set forth for the American people to respond to and react to and live under by the Supreme Court. And, of course, a process, like all of this is indicative of a longer-term process, from which there's tons to unpack in and of itself. For those who are curious and need to know, if you go to any of the usual search engines, if you trust such things, put a pin in that. It's one of those quirky things up on the corkboard. And by indicating that, I'm, please don't project any opinion one way or the other about what I believe or don't believe about search engines. But put a pin on that, because there is a big issue about whether or not you do or do not believe what you find on a given particular search engine or platform or whatnot. But as reported in Politico, and then of course reported throughout the political news ecosphere here in the United States, and I'm sure, although I haven't verified, progressively, increasingly around the world, an initial draft copy of a document which has been authenticated during the last 24, 36 hours, I do believe, and forgive me at all times as a permanent asterisk, disclaimer, and item on the corkboard, if I'm ever wrong about something. I did not, to the best of my understanding, memory, knowledge, and intention currently now live before you, do it maliciously. I was duped by some source or information item that was incorrect. But in this case, I believe, to the best of my understanding, I speak to you confirmable, verifiable facts. Someone from the Supreme Court has confirmed that this was indeed actually an initial draft, that they were circulating amongst themselves and preparing to push through final revisions, etc., and whatever else the constitutionally established process of the Supreme Court involves, getting to a final decision, which is then rendered and published. So here we are. And like I said, there's crazy amount of things to unpack. And of course, already there is an uproar. And quite predictably, if I may call out right now and question, why is that the direction? I mean, although also it's a bit of a catch-22, which I want to circle back to. But each side of the political echo chamber is hyper-vigilantly focused on completely different aspects of this event. Put a pin on that in the quadrant of the board that represents immediate circling back during a particular given episode as you're listening to it. Thank you kindly. And And here we go. So if those curious, and I always encourage and applaud and ask the question, have you read it? The direct individual pursuit of reading source documents such as this for your own perusal. The quickest source I found was, of course, the website for the publication that I think broke the story, Politico.com. If you type in Supreme Court leaked draft and Politico, I'm sure you will undeniably be able to find it. Okay, so my mind is reeling, and I'm not really sure where to start, except for maybe to turn to a bit of dark comedy. And folks, as always, this show, it's a permanent disclaimer. All thoughts, ideas, statements, anything that can be lumped or categorized as public discourse and free speech is inherently my own, except otherwise when noted, and I'm quoting from the public sphere of others expressing themselves in public discourse. So I was thinking things, sort of trying to find my way to expressing something like this, and I came across this, and I'm like, this is not quite how I probably would have written it, but is darn near perfect in and of itself, and I really can't totally disagree with it. But at the Andrew Nadeau, spelled Nadeau, over on the Twitter sphere, or the Twitterverse, wrote, and I quote, "To be fair, there's no way anyone could have predicted the side that keeps doing evil things would do something evil, and the side that keeps refusing to stop them would refuse to stop them." Quote. Shout out to Andrew Nadeau and huzzah for calling spade a spade and calling it like he sees it. Now, arguably, there's now plenty of parenthetical urgent opportunity for the side that seems to kind of keep falling for the Lucy and the football trick, and therefore once once, twice, shame on me, 3, 4 times, I'm complicit in the shenanigans, to step up. And this, I mean, political leaders, as well as activists, because we need a combination of public pressure, as, expressed by the American citizenry in their free speech rights to go to the public town square, both literally in IRL and also figuratively vis-a-vis whatever online internet platforms they choose to express themselves on. Now, obviously, those who applaud and support this particular decision, or who would have, let's keep the support in the theoretical because this was a leaked draft, and let's acknowledge here in this moment that there's problematic issues there. ... Pin on the board. But let's circle back on that, because that can't be denied, right? Like if I was having a conversation with someone, I'd be like, we have to acknowledge that. We also have to not get caught up in it because, I mean, there's clearly a sort of like logjam there as people pile on to with a sort of oppositional set of ideas about it, and the implications and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I do want to address it, but I also want to sort of kick out the show with my own specific overview of how I see things and sort of the stuff that I've encountered. Now, setting aside for one hot second the actual issue of whether or not Roe versus Wade is good, bad, does good things, does bad things, or deserves to remain standing, does not deserve to remain standing, because that's a quagmire of questions. And honestly, I'll be really full disclosure. I don't have the body of Roe versus Wade up front of me. What I did have was, and I don't even think I have it anymore. I had the Wikipedia page for Roe versus Wade up in front of me, or on one of these things, on one of my platforms, somewhere. Oh wait, I think I had copy pasted a blurb and put it in this notebook over here. But also, my brain's been reeling, and there's been a lot. Isn't there? No, maybe I don't. Is it this? No. Okay. Oh, no, there it is. Boom. Let's, if I may be so bold, first of all, let me share let me share just a little bit about where is this from? Apparently, this was posted by U.S. National News, right? And no infringement is intended. I just I want to discuss the matters that are out there as points of fact in the sphere of public discourse regarding this issue. I found this circulating as a screen grab, so it's kind of memified, and it's being posted in conversation as a sort of like, here you go, yes, it's been confirmed that this isn't just that this leak and its complicated issues about it can't be dismissed as some sort of hoax. U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts, and I'm quoting here, U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts confirms leaked draft of the abortion decision is authentic, orders investigation. That's the headline. So that happened Tuesday. To the best of my recollection, the leak happened Monday. I caught it live and I wanted to jump on the air, but I also was like, wow, this is huge. This is huge on multiple levels. This is huge for multiple reasons. This is problematic. This is a quagmire. And I really want to sort of absorb it, process it, and hear what's going on in the public sphere of public discourse before I add my middling 2 cents to the cacophony. But I do want to be clear from the get-go. I stand as an ally in the chorus of voices in the public discourse, speaking out in support of women, specifically pregnant women who have had, up until this, who, let's be really clear, silver lining, still do have, because nothing's been formalized and that decision wasn't final, and that was a leaked draft. So as things stand legally, Roe versus Wade has not been overturned. So I stand with all the women, especially those who find themselves to be in the sort of situation, pregnant and facing a complicated, and wildly ranging series of situations, contexts, obstacles, problems, and risks that, most assuredly, the old white, hyper-conservative, and sort of suspiciously zealously religious men that made this decision, or that or that contributed towards everything that built up towards this particular moment, don't really understand, don't want to understand, don't care to understand, and are completely bypassing the process of attempting to understand. And that's a whole brutal thing. And I speak in the broadest of general and theoretical terms, because it cannot be any other. I am of the opinion that it'd be really difficult to imagine that it would be any other way. in terms of like who's driving this, given that the preponderance of evidence and the fairly specific and peculiarly bizarre set of ramifications and potential outcomes that this kind of decision, should the Supreme Court actually reach the point where they bold-facedly overturn Roe versus Wade, the impacts and the repercussions and the things that could potentially unfold after that would be beyond the pale. And here's the crux of, I think, what I really want to stand by. Unjust, unfair, immoral, and categorically un-American. So I want to make that really clear. And I have my reasons, and I think that I can back them up, back these kinds of statements up. So one of the important things about this discussion, which I think, where's the thing? Something I want to reference, but there's something else. Oh, okay, there it is. I just forgot that I had a weird version of it. That obviously those who would support and applaud the ultimate final version of what this leaked document indicates the Supreme Court is moving towards, is the problematic issue surrounding and sort of impeding or complicating such a decision, which is the reality that, as I think it's Senator Susan Collins points out, and I'm quoting Susan Collins, if this leaked draft opinion is the final decision and this reporting is accurate, it would be completely inconsistent with what Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh said in their hearings and in our meetings in my office. To put it a different way, these two justices, during their confirmation hearings, lied bold-facedly. Not by accident. I would not be able to believe that they stumbled into that unintentionally. But I would argue, and I think many other observers have argued, as a sort of quiet, programmatic, top-down, organized, and highly motivated effort to achieve such a decision of striking down Roe versus Wade. And as many observers are pointing out, that it's quite unlikely that would be, like, in any way, shape, or form the end of their efforts, but rather probably some sort of kicking off, explosive beginning to what I would humbly beg to suggest would be a dangerous path of Supreme Court activity that would terraform the geopolitical landscape of these grand old United States of America. Okay, so there's way more complicated issues than that, but I really wanted to start with that right from the beginning. All three of Trump selected things lied, right? They lied under oath, as well as all the other places, contexts, situations, and media that they reiterated those lies. Okay? That, you can't just bypass that. And quite frankly, we get a little bit earlier than I expected in my own mind about how I was going to talk about this, because there's like a bazillion notes I wrote today and posts I posted on social medias that I want to try to touch on and reference and read from you. Because not only do I want to read to you other people's ideas and thoughts about it, but also my own, which I've been sort of woolly gathering for the last 48 hours or so, or however long it's been. But so that problematic issue in and of itself, especially if you see it as it's surfacing now after the Clarence Thomas issue, like Clarence Thomas should recuse himself from things, any and all decisions that factually, legally, and by whatever any other morally, ethically, and any other measure you want to measure it, present a conflict of interest based on his own and inclusive of his wife's, monetized political activism and other such practices that may be problematic and create legitimate conflict of interests. Likewise, I'm of the opinion, and I think others are as well, that these justices, which are now contributing to a bold-faced, two-faced, complete about-face on the generally accepted premise that Roe versus Wade and the decision of Wade, which, by the way, for those who may not be familiar, because I realize that this is not as common knowledge as the general phrase Roe versus Wade. The case is Wade for one. There's multiple cases involved in all of these things, right? Like in the leaked document, in the decision, it's referencing multiple things. So there's multiple things going on. So there's a case called Wade 410 U.S. 1113 from 1973. And this can be described, as it is on Wikipedia, as a, quote, landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. They ruled that the Constitution effectively protects, and I'm paraphrasing in my own words, what I read on Wikipedia. So, don't accuse me of plagiarism and don't accuse me of misinformation, because I'm not reading exactly word for word. I just want to clarify. But effectively protects pregnant women and their liberty to choose whether or not to, bring their pregnancy to term or end it preemptively through an abortion, right? To have the choice. And to have that, and I would add to what's, I think, like if I was the kind of activist, and activist is a touchy word, but if I was the kind of person motivated enough to suggest an edit to Wikipedia, I would add the fact that it's to have the privacy and the protections of privacy to make that choice under informed consent and the consultation of all the different parties that a woman in that situation may want to or feel that they need to consult, which would be open to, and include, faith practitioners and whatnot, but should never exclude that woman's doctor. Brackets or parentheticals, which brings up the issue that inherent in all of this is that, the same people or the same political movement that's orchestrated this maneuver, not the leak, but rather the fact that the Supreme Court's ready to publish a finalized version of what is, what we can effectively say is something not too different from this document in the not too distant future. All those people have been working to A, outlaw birth control, B, strip women's access to healthcare. So, complex issues, put a pin on the board, try to come full circle back to that sort of stuff. But to finish up the whole important thing about Wade, and I'm adding to things, right? Like those are caveats that I'm adding that are missing, A, from Wikipedia and probably the general understanding from a legal term, but that I propose, as if we're going to get this mile that the right wing activists have just taken back, and redress it, we should also sort of make some progress in this direction of privacy, right? Although some would argue that that's inherently implied. Like part of the rationale from what I remember when I was first taught about Roe versus Wade. So it might be another case, not necessarily inherently in Wade, but somewhere in there's the proposition that the Constitution, although not explicitly in a keyword search style, but implicitly in sort of the spirit of the law and through the preponderance of not jurisprudence, but what's it called? Legal precedent and stare decisis, protects not just women, but everyone's right to privacy and to make decisions that inherently have to do, in whatever regard that the decision is specifically anchored in, with their personal autonomy, aka their individual freedom. So my big blast, I inherently stand and have always stood in support of women's choice and the freedom of that choice and the protections so that choice is, as Wikipedia reminds us, not excessively burdened or obstacleized or weaponized by government restriction. Right? So all three of these individuals, here's a quote that I meant, that I was inspired, this particular chunk of the talk. M. Paladin from Brooklyn, New York City. And I'm not entirely sure if this is a local politician or I don't know who it is, but he's being, this quote, this meme-ified quote is being shared on the left. And it's something that, not being implicitly or inherently a leftist, I can't disagree with. Quote, all three of Trump's Supreme Court picks lied under oath. They lied when they said they believed Roe was settled law, and then they voted the other way. They should be impeached. I can't disagree with it. If they can't be impeached, they should most definitely be guided by their own moral, ethical guideposts and guardrails that apparently seem to be missing from the Supreme Court in the way that there's no oversight in this regard, to recuse themselves. Because, actually, one of the curious things about impeach and the way we use words is that a person impeaches themselves, and then there's the formal action of impeachment, right? There's another word for it. There's a not a cinnamon bun. There's a synonym. I can never pronounce that word correctly in a free-flowing. I can write it, but anyways. What is it? They've perjured themselves under oath. They stated something which they then went and acted against in their official capacity. And so essentially all three of them are extreme right-wing activist justices, something that the right wing decries and hypervilifies and rejects and tries to actively fundraise about casting the left-wing justices as activists, right? And poo-pooing it as bad. So hypocrisy. There's hypocrisies within hypocrisies within hypocrisies here, friends. So at a legalistic level, at a functional level, at a what do we do first, next level? Not to mansplain things. I don't want to mansplain things. For purposes of this show, I want you to know that my intent is to speak this and direct it not at women by any shape or form. Am I trying to mansplain anything to women right now? But rather to those men out there that might, maybe, perhaps, perchance, in a dream somewhere, come across my podcast and be open-minded enough to be willing to hear another man out that's standing in support of the opposite position that they disagree with, but that arguably they have plenty of cause to not stand by. So, dear Republicans, whoever out there, or conservatives, Christian conservative Republicans that probably aren't listening, this is a colossal exposition or expose of the hypocrisy that's inherent, as I think, honestly, I've been asking and probing and questioning and calling out for quite some time, arguably in terms of the way I speak about it publicly or to individuals that engage me in discussion about it publicly or privately or, family, etc., strangers I meet in the world, friends I've had in the world, since Ronald Reagan was in office. And that, to some people, seems an improbably long time. But the party of small government, the party of personal liberty, of personal autonomy, of privacy, is literally using and sort of, I would argue, corrupting the mechanisms of the federal government and state government in order to quite hypocritically bring about multiple series of governmental actions that result in the oppressive legislation of women in a way that undeniably strips away rights which have been established in the past, and opens the door to continue to strip more rights away, frighteningly. On that note, friends, I'm actually kind of surprised that I've got so much to say. I've already read that one. There's so many things. My brain's a little bit mush right now. Okay. Pause. Caveat. I'd like to point out something I've been trying to, jump in on the chorus of people calling this out, because I'm not the only one. But there were plenty of options to resolving this problematic issue, because it has been a contentious issue for generations, right? For decades and decades and decades, long enough for multiple generations of men and women to get divided along, political ideological lines about this. But there are alternatives. One of the ones that I've actually, instead of, hold on a second, one second. And I really wanted to think back and look at this. But we'll come back to that. That no longer sort of fits for this bit right now. Oh, I'm taking so long. Here it is, right? So I'm quoting myself because I wrote this and shared this on social media. And it's, of course, getting curiously mixed responses. But I quote, if I may, if you will allow me, really quickly, to quote myself. If they really wanted to end unwanted pregnancies and abortion, they, whoever they might be, the ones that are pushing this, that have brought everything to this culminating point, anyone and everyone that proclaims themselves to want to do that, if you really want to do that, then we should, I would propose that we, instead of making it us versus them, right? If we, because honestly, who can disagree with that? I want to spread, if we want to end unwanted pregnancies and abortion collectively together, whilst respecting all women's autonomy and right to choose for themselves what to do about a particular surprise pregnancy, we could, in fact, choose. And in fact, I wish I'd written it this way, the way I'm saying it now, instead of the way that I wrote it. And if I can, maybe I'll go back and rewrite it. But we could fund healthy, fact-based sexual health education in age-appropriate contexts and not in age-inappropriate contexts, obviously. And additionally, and here's where some people will, here's where we really separate the boys from the men, in my humble opinion. Because I have fully supported this ever since I was aware of the technique, which I don't have like a name for. And currently I do not believe is available anywhere. But I digress. We as a society, both locally and nationally and internationally, could subsidize and incentivize and regulate and make sure it's fair and all that, and by all means stop far clear of the line of dictating and literally top-down tyrannically imposing but rather making it a healthy option, ensuring the right to choose at all time, to choose privately, for men to choose the option to submit themselves, or not, that's the worst term, but you kind of do have to consider that, that it is that, to a surgical alternative to vasectomy, which is easily reversible. Like I said, there's no name that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure that a roundabout series of searches could probably find the original source of this. But at some point, not too long ago in the not too foggy distant history of medical American history, a doctor was confronting the problematic issues, made aware, and the whole cacophony of argument back and forth about these kinds of things, and was wondering what kind of alternatives could be developed to vasectomy, which, although is curiously not always 100% effective. Sometimes, the body fixes that which the surgeon tries to truncate. And at any rate, there was a procedure that a particular doctor somewhere, I believe in the United States, although if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. Maybe it was somewhere else. An alternative to vasectomy that uses small surgical clamps on whatever key pipelines in the male anatomy that need to be gently, safely, and reversibly clamped off in order to block the delivery of the next wave of mature sperm from the production factory into the mixing port. I'm trying to speak about this without being too gross about it. Before those things all flow into the process that we're all familiar with that leads to a pregnancy. These clamps were, at the time that I remember reading about them, before they were mysteriously disappeared from the marketplace and from development, they were effective at preventing pregnancy. It was a simple procedure, it was a safe procedure, and it was a reversible procedure. If we as a collective of collectives really wanted to end all of the nightmarish, horrific problems that can come about, because let's put a quick pause here to remember, in a world before the modern medical innovation of a safe medicine, a safe, sound, medically sound, scientifically functional abortion, untold numbers of women suffered terribly under all kinds of different complicated circumstances, finding themselves in an unwanted pregnancy or with an unwanted pregnancy, and no options, no safe, sound, legal medical options. And so this is an undeniable fact. I apologize, I don't have any kind of statistical numbers in front of me, but many, many, many women not only suffered generally, but died in a direct result of a complicated pregnancy, right? And we can put a pin in that or make a whole episode about it. But that's not my plenty of women are out there speaking about this. From complications with the pregnancy to to emergencies that develop, that have a propensity to develop during the delivery process, etc. To come full circle, which is why it's inherently unjust, unfair, and un-American, and unconstitutional for legislation to strip away rights in this way, especially if it endangers the lives of those whose rights have been taken away. So instead of it choosing a really safe, fair, effective, because it would be fair, right? Like, it takes two to tango. And if men had that option, and if sexual education was was offered and available to those young people of the appropriate age that were beginning, to be curious about and then therefore subsequently engage in sexual acts, so that they could understand what's going on and, safe, effective, preventative measures were available and not constantly being, chipped away and or minimized and or, constantly attempted to be banned. We could undoubtedly end abortions vis-a-vis the simple reality of, hyper minimizing and ending the vast majority, if not all, unwanted pregnancies without taking anyone's rights away, right? Creating this kind of voluntary option, which is safe, sound, and in no way, shape, or form dangerous to the male body, and taking responsibility for it there, right? Instead of unduly and unfairly entirely burdening the entire thing on the woman in the first place. Because let's admit something. Human history is burdened with the reality that chauvinism and misogyny have been the default for an unimaginable long period of time. And that there seems to be some propensity, conscious or unconscious, amongst some portions of the male population to inch towards that, towards the normalization of that kind of mainstream misogyny and sexism, and that's just inherently immoral and wrong. But, and it's amazing people really try to make some sort of argument against that. So many levels. I mean, don't even get me started on the fact that because healthcare is a profit-driven business, and insurance is kind of basically exposing itself as a scam, and inflation, etc., just going to the hospital to give birth is, the cost of that is spiraling out of control. Historically speaking, the facts clearly indicate that women who give birth to, who just simply that, period, no more complicating issues, just women giving birth face risk of bodily injury and or death, right? And women who are suffering complicated pregnancies, all this stuff escalates beyond that. And I'm here to add to the public discourse that, quite frankly, it seems illogical, unjust, unfair, and immoral, and un-American for laws that specifically target women and legislate things about their bodies and the choices they can have around these situations. It's just inherently un-American and flawed and immoral. Like, we should not tolerate that happening. As plenty of other people say, is that we should be allowed, we shouldn't have this kind of legislation about anybody's bodies. Yeah, that's probably, we need to have I can't think of anything out of my head that I need the government telling me not to do, but also we start to navigate towards, or we can get towards the issues of that are sort of totally unrelated and also equally triggering, such as suicide. But let's not go down those avenues now. Let's stick on track with this, because as other people are pointing out, a chorus of female voices are pointing out, but I'm going to quote one in particular, Takara Millard, I believe from Twitter, at Takara Elise, quote, "Forced birth in a country with the highest maternal mortality rate, no paid maternity leave, no universal subsidized childcare, no continued birth parent care, and frequently inaccessible mental health care. I mean, like, that's where we're going to be. That's me. That's my, like, she was just stating that. End quote. Her whole quote ends at mental health care, right? Forced birth in a country with the highest maternal mortality rate. And, what's the right medical term for the infant mortality rate? No paid maternity leave, no I was adding that. That's not in her quote. The baby mortality rate, but no maternity leave, no universal subsidized childcare, no continued birth parent care, and frequently inaccessible mental health care. Period. I don't know if there was like a part 2, but like this aggression from the right cannot stand. And that's where I want to round through. There's so much more we could talk about. But I'm going to come back to this in a part 2, probably tomorrow. Because there's too much to say, too much to talk about. There's one final thing, though. Where's the bit? So for those, again, there are some out there, and it's obviously part of the discourse and part of the rationalization, but they're saying we're just returning this authority or this choice to the states so that the people can choose vis-a-vis their representatives. The flaw, from my perspective, is that as of right now, there are, as we stand right now in America, abortion is still legal, and whatever pre-existing arguments, limitations, restrictions, injunctions, etc. are what they are, and it's a complicated mess to begin with. It's already inherently unfair, unjust, and unduly oppressive of women and disrespectful of their medical autonomy, in my humble opinion. But as we stand, here's the bit that makes it not just about what I just said earlier about the justification. We're just transferring the choice back to states and the people through the representatives. Nearly half of the states in America, in the United States of America, right, 23 states already have prefab anti-abortion legislation that's ready to be instantly brought into effect on a hair trigger the moment that the Supreme Court actually finalizes and fully rules to strike down the legal standing of Roe versus Wade. Okay? So they'll gaslight you about, like, we're not making abortion illegal. No, not in the entire country. But you've set it up so that nearly half the country's states are going to just... I don't know the exact numbers, but in terms of the wide-ranging scope of those 23 states, I should be clear. There's a small number of states that have really specific prefab legislation that's set up. Others, and there's some trigger laws, right? But there's sort of like a concentric ring of different categories of laws or drafts, things, or contingency clauses, etc. And effectively, in a blink of an eye, in nearly half the country, if not more, because I'm sure there's even more states that have the rumblings or the early movement towards this, being introduced and ratified in their state legislatures, and there's problematic issues with that on so many levels that I'm like, my mind reels. Right? And not the least of the problematic issues being that there's plenty of reasonable reasons to afford women this right. And that it's unjustifiable to do this, knowing the negative impacts and knowing the sort of dirty, suspicious AF way that this all got brought about, and knowing deep down, because let's keep it 100% real right now. Everybody knows that should this happen in the future, women with the means to cross state lines and travel far away and go to other countries are still going to pursue that. And a bunch of them are going to be white, conservative, Christian, evangelical. You know, they're going to be members of this demographic that are cheering for this and have been supporting this and have been rallying around this and donating tons of money towards this, over the several decades and generations. But the process, right, from its roots, and just to keep it in the sort of most immediate relative framework, but we can go back all the way to Barry Goldwater, right? But from the hyper-conservative think tank that literally hand-selected, pre-screened individuals as potential nominees, all the way to the Republicans in Congress who blocked Neil Gorsuch, straight through the suspicious and absurdly ridiculous Trump administration and all the complicated context and craziness around that, and the court packing, everything that's led up to this moment now. All of it stinks of an effort, to me personally, right? So I'm speaking to you completely from my own mind and from a lifetime of experiencing this collective movement, this back and forth, this tug of war between the right and the left. All of this stinks to me of an organized effort to normalize and attempt to actually institutionalize some form of ethno-religious hijacking of state apparatus. That there seems to be a concerted effort to try and make the United States of America some kind of Christian ethno-nationalist oligarchy or kleptocracy. And frankly, I do not think I stand alone in this. I think I can be so bold as to say that myself and many others find this categorically un-American. From the separation of church and state on down through all the other reasons. So my final word here as I wrap up the show, and I'm sure I won't be the only person thinking on this and speaking on this and advocating it, but we've got to make sure that we engage in it in the most uplifting way possible, in the most bipartisan, collaborative, nonpartisan way possible. Organize. Apply public pressure to the politicians at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. Apply public pressure directly to the Supreme Court. If I had one thing that I could say that I wish would go so viral that all the men on the side supporting this movement towards such a stripping away of reproductive rights and the the path that unfolds after, be like, slow your roll, bro. Right now is the time to stop and listen to the women in your life. Because ironically and ridiculously and tragically, every man on the right end of the spectrum, of the political spectrum, that's trying to rationalize this, that's trying to mansplain this to women, that this is the right choice, this is the correct move, knows a woman in their life that had to confront this choice for themselves. Each and every one of these politicians has women in their lives that had to have an abortion, right? And to bring this point into focus, plenty of women, plenty of female politicians have spoken openly, painfully, vulnerably about such circumstances in their own real life. There's ways to solve this issue without allowing for those who are pushing this to keep pushing our culture and our laws along the path that flies off the slippery slope that ends on the cliff of falling into becoming some kind of hyper-religious, patriarchal, misogynistic, ethno-nationalist state with all the flaws that comes with that sort of thing. That's the long-term trajectory that is not far-fetched. It's not outlandish. And that is quite clearly objectionable to a vast plurality, if not the blatant majority, of citizens of the United States, of Americans. Dear friends, I want to pause here and bring this show to a close on that thought. I hope I don't sound too alarmist. I hope I don't sound too beyond the pale. I really do believe if you go back and review in a nonpartisan way, they've slowly become more and more open about it. But there's an element again, remember, for those who don't know me, a quick little sort of caveat before we go. No group of people is a monolith of anything, right? I'm not trying to say that all and every single Republican is a this or that. What I'm saying is that the Republican Party, the GOP, the politicians, and the base are a complicated mess, and there are components within that social political structure that are indeed in alignment with, in collaboration with, in cahoots with a very small minority of people in this country that are ethno-nationalists in their political ideology. And friends, that's categorically un-American. Categorically un-American. An ethno-religious fascism, will not fly here. So I want to close on the note that, I really, and I know this can be dismissed as aspirational or wishful thinking, but I genuinely do not think that any of this is going to pan out in the middle to long term in the way that these politicians and this movement seem to think that it should. And one of the silver linings, the current glimmer of hope, is that this was indeed, to come full circle, a draft. Not yet a finalized, confirmed, published, official decision by the court. There is room. There is time now to organize, to get engaged, to not allow fear or anger to overwhelm us as a community or a collective of opponents to this effort to criminalize women and strip them away of their previously established constitutional rights to privacy and choice on this issue, on this matter. So there you go, friends. That's my stand. I'll be sticking with it. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and checking it out. I hope it was engaging, thought-provoking, and to some degree or another, entertaining enough, inspiring. Not to sound grandiose or self-aggrandizing, but we have to support each other and inspire each other to speak out and to stand firm and to bring public pressure on the political infrastructure to reform and take action. And there's so much more that can be said on that, but we'll put a bunch of pins on the corkboard and leave it there. As always, friends, thank you, thank you, thank you. Gratitude, 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 and namaste. Here's the news, breaking news outro. These segments are usually short and snappy, but today's wild and lackadaisical sort of intro was meant to set a different tone.
And that is the latest news, breaking news. We now return you to your regularly scheduled brainwashing. Thank you for listening.
Here's the quote I was looking for, my own quote. And friends, this is something that cannot be ignored because it's not a problem here just in the United States. In my humble opinion, the quote, red elephant in the room is that the through line connecting everything going on here in the United States of America really is all part of an effort towards normalizing the establishment of a patriarchal, white, ethno-nationalist state with a, quote, and I use sarcasm bunny ears, quote, Christian version of some kind of Sharia-like law. And that's categorically un-American. According to the Founding Fathers, and according to all rational interpretation of where America can, could, should, would be going from, here. It's 2022, folks. Humanity already tried trying to live under a extreme conservative Christian authority system. It was called the Dark Ages. And we all know how that worked out for everyone. This aggression cannot stand, folks. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. And stay tuned for more, because I will be coming out with a part 2 probably tomorrow. Thank you for listening.